I am going to fulfill another request today. This one is for Fettuccine Alfredo. And I chose to do this for a couple of reasons. One is it'll be blessedly easy. I won't have to stand a lot. I won't have to put a lot of strain on my back, which is healing. And two, it'll be fun. And I get to make a pasta sauce that I really like, Alfredo sauce. So let's make this Fettuccine Alfredo. I'm going to make my pasta first because the dough will need to sit for a little bit. And you don't have to make your fettuccine from scratch. You can make it, you can buy it in the store, dry fettuccine. I'm putting some salt in because when you cook dry pasta, you salt the water because it's going to be cooking for 10, 12 minutes. It's going to be absorbing the salt from the water along with the water, and that'll salt that pasta a little bit and give it some flavor. But fresh pasta cooks in like a minute, so it doesn't have time to absorb much water. It's already got the moisture in there from the egg, so you put the salt in the pasta. And I'm putting in a little pinch there, maybe quarter teaspoon, and I'm making enough for one serving. When the pasta is going to be the center part of the dish, like this would be, then I'm figuring 1 egg per serving. If it's going to be a side dish, maybe you're going to have a roast or chicken or whatever, and the pasta is going to be on the side, 1 egg should feed 2 people. All right, I'm going to get that mixed up. I'm going to put in a little bit of olive oil. Just maybe, I don't know, not even a teaspoon. Okay. And then what I have here is some durum wheat semolina flour and some all-purpose flour. And I'm going to start working this in. This is each of these 2 flours. This is a 1/4 cup. And this is going to get clogged, so I'm going to switch to a spoon. So that's a 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, which is about 1 ounce, 30 grams, and then a 1/4 cup of durum wheat semolina. It's a heavier, harder flour. So this is maybe 1.5 ounces. I think this is 1.5 ounces or 43 grams. And I'm probably going to use more flour. Thing is, you don't know how absorbent the flours are going to be. And I know most people put their flour on the counter first, make a well in the middle, add the eggs and the salt. I've been doing it this way for 40 years. It works for me. I've never had problems doing it. So that's what I'm going to do. Bring this together. And that's still a bit sticky there. But I am going to transfer that now to the counter. And I have some extra flour on the side. This is my durum wheat semolina and my all-purpose flour. Get that spoon cleaned off. And then I'm going to start working in more flour as needed until I have a dough that's dry enough to knead. Okay, this is dry enough to knead. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of smearing it into the counter with the back of my hand, the heel of my hand. Kind of force the flour and the egg together. It's still a little bit sticky though. But it doesn't need much flour at this point. And that oil, by the way, that little bit of oil in there does tend to make the pasta a little more tender. If you like a really al dente pasta, really chewy, then you can skip the all-purpose flour and use all durum wheat semolina. This durum wheat semolina is a pasta flour. It's a hard flour, so it makes a more chewy pasta. Okay, that looks pretty smooth. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this in plastic and set this aside. It'll work through my pasta machine better if it has a chance to rest. The flour particles will absorb some more moisture. It'll get smoother. It'll crack less when I run it through my pasta machine. There are different ways of making Alfredo sauce. Go on the internet, Google it. You'll see different recipes. I like to make it by starting with a roux. And a roux is simply butter and flour. This is just regular all-purpose flour. I've got my pan over medium heat. I'm going to melt my butter, bring the flour and the butter together. My butter has melted. Turning my heat down to low. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cook this for about a minute, just so I can cook that flour and get the raw flavor out of it. My flour is cooked. Now, this is what's called a white roux. The more you cook this, the more the flour will start to darken. It'll start to brown. You can get this to a golden roux, which is good for making something like a chicken gravy. You can go further and make a brown roux to make an Espagne sauce or a beef gravy. In Creole and Cajun cooking, they like to make a really dark roux. They cook it and cook it and cook it until it's the color of dark chocolate. But for me, because I'm making a white sauce, I want a white roux. Now what I have here is 1.5 cups of milk. And that's about 350 milliliters. I'm going to bring my heat back up under this. And then I'm going to stir this and stir this and stir this until this comes to a boil. This is just now coming to the boil. I'm reducing the heat to medium-low. You can see it bubbling away there. And you can see how watery that is. It's not quite to the coats the back of a spoon stage. So you can cook this 5, 6 minutes, 8 minutes longer to make this thicker if you want. I am going to thicken this. I'm stirring this constantly while I'm doing this so it doesn't scorch in the bottom of the pan. And while I'm doing this, I thought I would explain a few things. This is what's called a white sauce, one of the mother sauces, because from here you can invent or make other sauces. For example, you could add some salt, some nutmeg, a little bit of white pepper, and end up with a bechamel sauce. So for example, a white lasagna is typically made with a bechamel. In Italy, it's known as a balsamella sauce, rather than using a red sauce, a tomato-based sauce. Or instead, you could add some dry sherry, some white pepper, some ground oregano, and have a seafood sauce that I like to use with shrimp and pasta. It's my favorite way of eating a seafood pasta. I'm not going to do any of that because I'm making an Alfredo sauce. And as I understand it, and my Italian friend, she's from Italy, she confirmed this, that Alfredo sauce is not one of the standard Italian sauces. Supposedly around the 1900s in Rome, it was invented by a chef, Alfredo, to satisfy the palate of those Americans that they love cheese in everything. So he came up with this cheese sauce to satisfy the American tourists. And that's supposedly where Alfredo sauce came from. It's not truly an Italian sauce, although it has an Italian name. All right, I cooked this for 5 minutes. You can see how it has a nice coating texture to it now. I stirred it the entire time because I didn't want any scorching in the bottom of the pan. Now, I have here 2 ounces, which is about 60 grams of cheese, shredded cheese. I'm going to put about half of this in there now. I turned the heat off, by the way, under this because I don't want this cheese to get too stringy in that sauce. I'm going to put about half of that in there, stir it in, and then taste it to see how cheesy it is. If you want it really cheesy, you can add a lot more cheese if you want. All right. I Got my red handled tasting spoon ready, my infamous red handled tasting spoon. Let's see how this tastes. This cheese, by the way, I'm using Romano. You can use Parmesan. This has a lot of salt in it, so I'm not salting this yet until I taste it. Needs more cheese. I do like a lot of cheese, I have to say. So another handful of cheese in there. I'm going to save some of that cheese for garnish. And then, now that I've had a little bit of a taste, I'm going to put a little pinch of salt in there. And then give this a taste again. I call this my infamous red handled tasting spoon because the red handle says, once this has been in my mouth, don't put it back in the pan. Oh. That is nice. That is very nice. I like that right there. So no more cheese. That's good. Now, one variation that I do, because that's just a plain white sauce. It looks okay, but it's not quite the way I would like it to see. I have here some chopped fresh parsley from my garden, about 4 sprigs of parsley. I'm just going to stir that in because I think it gives a little bit more of a colorful look. It's just mostly for appearances. And that is my Alfredo sauce. I'm ready now to start rolling my pasta dough here. I have a little flour duster, which is actually a powdered sugar duster, but I always use it for flour. I bought that in a cookware store. This is my pasta machine. This is an Atlas 150, model 150. They sell these on Amazon. I'm just flattening this out by hand so that it goes through the machine a little bit better. Okay, I have a dial here on the side. Mine goes from 1 up to number 7. I start at number 1, start rolling my pasta, and I'll eventually work this up to number 5. 5 is the thickness I use for most flat pastas. I'll go to number 6 if I'm making something like ravioli. So there's number 3, number 4, and finally number 5. And you can see very little cracking around the edges. That's because that dough has had a chance to sit for a while. And this is going to be a pretty big sheet. Too big for my cutting board, so I'll cut it in half. Where's my knife? Right here. Okay. 2 sheets of pasta dough. How difficult was that? That was easy. But as I said, if you want to, you can buy fettuccine in the store. Just going to lightly flour this so it doesn't stick in my machine. Although it's not feeling sticky at all. Okay, that's ready. I'm going to cut each of these in half. Move my crank here to my noodle cutter. This cutter has 2 different cuttings. These are very narrow, making like square spaghettis, and this is a flat noodle cutter that makes like fettuccine. Roll that through, and there are my noodles. Separate these up. I've got a bowl here on the side. I can put these in. See, I would call that a fettuccine. Before I start cooking these, let me explain that I have 2 pots of water coming to the boil on the stove. The reason for 2 will become obvious in a moment when I start plating my pasta. I have 2 bowls set up. My Italian bowl, made, hand painted in Italy. And this is made by ceramic students. The students weren't ceramic, they were studying ceramics. The reason why I have two bowls is because this is my noodles that I made from scratch, my pasta. And then this is some spinach noodles that I cooked up. Spinach tagliatelle. It's packaged like this. Inside they call these nests. Dry pasta. You cook it, bought it in the store. The reason why I do that is because of this. Get my sauce. I thinned this a little bit because it thickened as it was sitting, and I warmed it up again. White sauce on white pasta isn't as photogenic to me as white sauce on green pasta. It just has more contrast, more color to it. So if I'm thinking about photography, I tend to do this rather than this. And I'm finally going to top this a little bit with my remaining cheese that I set aside. Last step is to see how good these taste. I want to taste my homemade pasta, because I love to make pasta from scratch. I have on YouTube a video just about making pasta from scratch, all the different shapes you can make with homemade pasta. That is so good. It's got a mild cheesy flavor, not a real strong cheesy flavor. I don't want it too strong, but it has a nice delicate texture to it. The pasta is cooked to perfection. Homemade pasta just, to me, is so much better. All right. Oh, I haven't had lunch yet today, so excuse me. I'm going to go enjoy a late lunch of Fettuccine Alfredo. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit my website, mobilehomegourmet.com, and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.